Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news, so if you haven't had time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. Stay tuned for our weekly review where we'll give you the scoop on the biggest stories that you may have missed in the last 7 days, right from Tel Aviv. I'm Aaron Porras, and thank you for joining us. At least 2 people have just been seriously injured and 2 more killed in a suspected terror attack at the Asaf junction near Ramallah Thursday morning. And this is just 2 kilometers down the road from the scene of the drive-by shooting on Sunday evening at a bus stop near Ofra. According to Magen David Adom paramedics, the remaining 2 live victims are in critical condition and were rushed to the hospital. And witnesses say a man in a car pulled up from Route 60, opened fire, and then fled. The shooter was intercepted shortly after, however, and neutralized. IDF officials are investigating the circumstances and motives behind the attack, but early indications point to nationalistic terror. And this just after the IDF found and killed overnight both the shooters from Ofra this week and from Barkan in October. Speaking of the terror attack in Ofra, the baby who was delivered prematurely after his mother was seriously wounded in the terror attack in Ofra has died. The baby, who was given the name Amiyad Israel, was laid to rest in the Mount of Olives cemetery in Jerusalem last night. And earlier in the day, doctors at the Shaare Zedek Medical Center in Jerusalem pronounced his death after he had spent his entire short life in the ICU. The baby's parents, Shira and Amichai Ishran, were able to visit the baby for the first time Wednesday morning in the hospital, though they're still recovering themselves from the gunshot wounds that they sustained, and they were unable to attend the funeral. The baby's grandfather, however, Rafael Ishran, eulogized the baby, saying that in his short life he had managed to unite the nation of Israel. And condolences and well wishes poured into the family from all over. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that our hearts are with Shira and Amichai. And then President Reuven Rivlin recited a famous poem about a baby bird that falls from his nest and can't be rescued. And it wasn't just Israel united by the death either. United States Special Envoy Jason Greenblatt tweeted that the baby's death was absolutely heartbreaking, while the European Union ambassador to Israel said he was deeply saddened to hear the baby's passing in the terror attack. Now, immediately following the funeral, the IDF and Shin Bet launched an operation early Thursday morning to track down and kill the 2 terrorists in Nablus, Saleh Omar Barghouti, who is responsible for the Ofra shooting, as well as Ashraf Walid Suleiman Na'alawa, who murdered 2 people in the Barkan Industrial Park in October. This means that Na'alawa had been on the run for nearly 2 months.
أنا صحيت الساعة تقريبا الساعة 1 بالليل، دبك وصوت أول شيء انفجار قوي جدا جدا. بس شو هو ما عرفتش، فكرت إشي فقع يعني في الدار عندي. صحيت في الليل بطلع اللي هو صوت جيش، صوته يعني ولا دبكة يعني لا توصف يعني شو اللي صار في قلب الدار والله ما واحد عرف فينا.
During overnight operations by the Israeli National Counter-Terrorism Unit, the Yamam, 2 terrorists were shot and killed. Both the terrorists were involved in recent terrorist attacks. One of the terrorist attacks that had taken place, 2 Israelis were killed just over 2 months ago. And in the second operation that took place, the second terrorist that was killed was behind the shooting attack that took place a few days ago, where a woman was injured seriously and unfortunately her baby had passed away in hospital.
On Thursday morning, after the deaths were announced, Hamas then claimed responsibility for the Ofra shooting and hailed Barghouti as a heroic martyr. Before Barghouti was killed, though, Hamas praised the attack but refrained from claiming it as their own. Newly discovered footage purportedly showing 22-year-old Palestinian Mohammed Habali being shot in the head from behind last week was released yesterday by human rights group B'Tselem, and it appears to completely contradict initial IDF accounts. Habali, who is both mentally and physically disabled, suffered a bullet wound to the head in December in the West Bank town of Tulkarem, and he was later pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. Now, initially, the IDF reported that Habali was killed during a violent riot in which live fire was used to disperse the rock-throwing crowd. But the new CCTV footage gathered and released by B'Tselem shows from 4 different angles the moment Habali falls to the ground, and there is no such riot in the video. In fact, the area appears to be fairly calm, with just a few Palestinians walking casually around. Suddenly, the people on the street scatter, but Habali, who uses a walking stick, couldn't move in time and was shot from behind. Later, 3 soldiers are seen leaving the area without offering any medical assistance. The IDF has since restated their story that the soldiers in the area were responding to a disturbance in the area in which Habali was caught in unintentionally. The army has also stated that its investigation is ongoing, however, and that when it is complete, the military prosecution will examine the evidence. But B'Tselem again pressed the IDF in their statement accompanying the video, saying that the army only responded when the killing was made public, and that contrary to the army's statement, quote, the soldiers are seen walking unhurriedly, the Palestinians are seen talking amongst themselves, and then the soldiers fatally shot Habali in the head from a considerable distance. The lethal shooting was not preceded by a warning, was not justified, and constitutes a violation of the law, end quote. All right, just a week after Israelis held a nationwide strike to protest domestic violence against women, organizers of the strike are today calling to renew demonstrations following the murder of yet another woman. Iman Ahmed Awad was stabbed to death in her home in the northern city of Acre on Tuesday, and police have opened an investigation into the circumstances leading to Awad's death, so far detaining her husband for questioning. But Awad's death brings the total number of women and girls murdered in Israel this past year alone to 25, marking a dramatic increase in domestic violence over previous years. And organizers of last week's protest are now again calling on all Israeli women and their allies to go on strike every day from now on for 25 minutes until the government implements its plan to combat domestic violence. The Secondary School Teachers Association has already announced it will join the protest, and high school teachers are set to strike during classes for 25 minutes beginning today. Now, the government also did take notice of the nationwide protests last week, which culminated in a massive rally with the participation of tens of thousands in Tel Aviv's Rabin Square. And the following morning, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu chaired a meeting of the Ministerial Committee on Violence Against Women, where in his opening remarks he equated violence against women with terrorism, saying that the government needs to help women victims of violence while at the same time giving a, quote, punch in the face, end quote, to abusive husbands. Netanyahu also vowed to take the issue seriously, saying there is a lot of work to be done. Well, he couldn't be more right this morning, as Israelis again plan to take to the streets. And only time will tell if the government is willing to actually put the money where its mouth is. Moving on, ahead of his security meetings slated for this evening, Prime Minister Netanyahu on Monday night addressed a conference at the Foreign Ministry of Israeli ambassadors to North America, Europe, the Middle East, Eurasia, and multiple other international organizations. And he again reiterated how Israel plans to deal with the threat of Hezbollah terror tunnels in the north, as well as how the Jewish state has and will continue to develop positive relations with the Arab and Muslim world. To begin, Netanyahu first opened with an update on Operation Northern Shield, and both he and the IDF made quite the startling revelations regarding Hezbollah's plan to conquer the Galilee. What you're hearing is audio captured by the IDF, which the army claims is the sound of Hezbollah's terrorists tunneling into Israel from Lebanon. And according to the army, there are many cross-border tunnels like this one, and many more still yet to find. But perhaps most worrying is the fact that to completely eliminate the tunnel threat, something will have to be done from the Lebanese side as well. To that end, IDF Chief Gadi Eisenkot has met with the head of the UNIFIL, the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, and has demanded that UNIFIL troops finish the job north of the border where Israel is forbidden to go. Otherwise, Israel is likely to act for herself. But additionally, as indicated by Netanyahu last night, the threat doesn't end with military action either.
הגילוי של המנהרות, מנהרות הטרור של חיזבאללה בגבול הצפון, הדבר הזה הוא חלק ממאמץ לא רק צבאי לחסום את איום המנהרות, אלא גם מאבק הסברתי, דיפלומטי וכלכלי, כדי להטיל סנקציות מוגברות על חיזבאללה, להעביר דזיגנציה של חיזבאללה על כל חלקיו כארגון טרור, לעבור את זה מדינה-מדינה, וכמובן גם להגביר את הסנקציות של איראן שעומדת מאחורי, על איראן, שעומדת מאחורי הגוף הזה, כמו גם מאחורי הניסיונות הדומים של החמאס.
Netanyahu then instructed the ambassadors in the room to take this information and go country to country, government to government, and demand that the nations of the world take a stand against the Hezbollah terrorist organization and the Iranian regime that backs it. Now, on a related note, Netanyahu's speech then drifted into world security, where he lauded Israel's contributions.
אנחנו מנענו עשרות פיגועים ברחבי העולם, קטסטרופליים, לא קטנים, עשרות פיגועים קטסטרופליים. ואף אחד אין לו מודיעין כמו שיש לנו, בכל האומות צריכות את זה. אז השילוב של היכולת הטכנולוגית שתיארתי, והיכולת המודיעינית הביטחונית, שאני רק נוגע בה בגופה, וחלק מכם מועסקים בה.
Through this and other cooperations, the Prime Minister then finally illustrated how Israel and the Arab world is beginning to cozy up to one another. Most notably, he said that when he meets with Arab leaders, they say, quote, "We have security and economic interests, and we also want to enjoy the fruits of progress, and we will no longer mortgage our normalization with the State of Israel to the Palestinians' caprices." End quote. Moving on, according to new reports Sunday from German daily Die Welt, Iran has significantly expanded its missile testing this year, including now a missile that can reach European countries. In fact, Iran is said to have doubled its missile testing in 2018, placing it in clear violation of 2015 nuclear accords signed with Western powers. The same accord, by the way, from which the United States under President Trump withdrew in May 2018. Precisely over violations such as this. Specifically, Iran is banned under UN Security Council Resolution 2231 from any activity related to ballistic missiles designed to carry nuclear weapons. And here now with more on the story is ILTV's Lidar Gavelazi. Lidar?
Thanks, Aaron. So, according to the German Daily, it obtained documentation from unspecified Western intelligence services confirming that in 2018, Iran tested at least 7 medium-range missiles and at least 5 short-range missiles and cruise missiles. This compared to only 4 medium-range and 1 short-range missile in 2017. As for the missiles, the paper specified that Iran tested 3 different variants of the Shahab-3 medium-range missile, at least 2 tests on variants of the Qiyam-1 cruise missile, and at least 1 Khorram-Shahar medium-range missile, which has the potential to reach European countries. The report also said it was possible that the missiles were capable of carrying nuclear warheads, which Iran is prohibited from testing as part of the 2015 international agreement it signed.
Right, so is the international community letting Iran get away with this, especially given the fragile state of the international agreement?
Well, this latest missile testing, which was conducted on November 30th, certainly did not go unnoticed by Western powers. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo condemned the missile testing and called on Iran to immediately halt these tests, since the development of this particular ballistic missile was in violation of UN Security Council Resolution 2231. In fact, last week, the UN Security Council met for a closed-door discussion over Iran's missile testing program. It was France and the UK that called for the meeting. France said it was concerned by the missile tests, describing them as provocative and destabilizing. Likewise, British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt called the missile test provocative, threatening, and inconsistent, and said Britain was determined that it should cease. Iran, however, has claimed that its missile testing program is not in any violation, as it is defensive in nature.
Okay, but still, despite violating the agreement, or at least appearing to violate the agreement, and angering France and the UK, Germany, the US, etc., it doesn't seem like any nation outside the United States is really willing to withdraw from the JCPOA anytime soon. So do these new developments, put any international agreement with Iran in jeopardy?
So with this latest round of missile testing, Iran is playing with fire, so to speak. After dropping out of the JCPOA in May, the U.S. has been trying to pressure European countries into reinstating sanctions on the Islamic Republic, and this is just providing the U.S. with more legitimacy in their efforts. A little over a week ago, Brian Hook, the senior policy advisor to U.S. Secretary of State and U.S. Special Representative for Iran, took the opportunity to repeatedly call on the EU to reinstate sanctions on Iran over these actions. In fact, again, missile testing such as this, as well as other, bad faith Iranian actions, are also the quoted reasons President Donald Trump decided to withdraw from the agreement in the first place.
All right, and by other bad faith actions, you mean sponsoring terror and destabilizing the region in general?
Essentially, yes. So it's really up to the EU and the UN now to show how far they're willing to go when Iran crosses their red lines. But so far, we haven't seen any concrete action on their part.
All right, well, keep us updated, Lidal, and thank you so much for your analysis.
Thanks.
The United States-sponsored resolution condemning Islamic terror group Hamas for launching rockets into Israel last month failed to pass by a two-thirds majority at the United Nations General Assembly on Thursday. And despite widely being expected to pass with ease, 87 world nations voted in favor of the measure, 58 voted against, 32 abstained, and 16 didn't vote. This marked the first time that Hamas terror organization in Gaza had been targeted by name for condemnation by the Assembly. And ahead of the vote, Israel's ambassador to the UN, Dani Danon, expressed high hopes over the outcome. And the motion was brought forth last week as one of the final motions presented by United States Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, who tweeted that, quote, countries must now ask themselves, are they for or against Hamas's violence? The choice is clear for the United States. We hope it will be for the rest of the UN as well, end quote. Well, the world has apparently decided, and it wasn't with the US and Israel. Though it is worth noting that the resolution would have passed had a two-thirds supermajority not been required. But Kuwait initiated a vote to require two-thirds vote, which passed just before.
Today, we achieved a plurality. That plurality would have been a majority if the vote had not been hijacked by a political move of procedure, but in one strong, courageous voice, we have brought Hamas to justice. For those member states that rejected this resolution, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Wait when you will have to deal with terrorism in your own countries. Your silence in the face of evil reveals your true colors. It tells us what side you are really on. A side that does not care for the lives of innocent Israelis and innocent Palestinians who have fallen victim to the terrorists of Hamas.
Now, before the vote, Ambassador Haley began with how the day could be a historic one, as not one single resolution condemning Hamas had been passed at the UN, while the General Assembly has passed over 700 against Israel. Quote, "That more than anything else is a condemnation of the United Nations itself," Haley said. Then after the vote, Ambassador Haley reported that President Trump called and asked which countries the United States would need to sanction with funding cuts as punishment. She added that, quote, "I'm not going to tell you what I told him," end quote. Palestinians and their supporters have, of course, lauded the outcome of Thursday's vote, however, blaming the United States for, quote, "exacerbating tensions and undermining the collective serious efforts to de-escalate." Now, back in the United States on Monday, the FBI arrested an Ohio man who now stands accused of plotting to attack a synagogue in Toledo. Jewish groups praised the FBI and other law enforcement agencies on the capture of 21-year-old Damon Joseph, who was inspired by the deadly shooting at Pittsburgh that left 11 dead, and the Islamic State terror group. But now, in the wake of this latest attempt at anti-Semitic violence, Jewish groups also urged to increase vigilance. Damon Joseph has been posting photos of weapons and ISIS and spoke about carrying out a violent attack for months now on social media. And according to an affidavit, Joseph wanted to murder as many people as possible, including a rabbi, and to not let anyone escape. He then also said the choice of the synagogue would depend on, quote, "which one will have the most people and at what time of day. Go big or go home," end quote. Joseph was arrested Friday after receiving 2 rifles from an undercover agent, and he was charged with attempting to provide material support to the Islamic State. In the wake of this plot, the Jewish Federation of Greater Toledo said, quote, "Keeping people safe is our highest priority. All threats to our community are taken very seriously, and we continue to coordinate with law enforcement diligently to keep us safe," end quote. And after the Pittsburgh attack, the 4 synagogues in Toledo have already received updated security protocols. Further, Toledo Mayor Kapsukowicz released a statement saying, quote, "We cannot tolerate hate directed towards people of Jewish faith or of any other religion. And last month's mass killing at a Pittsburgh synagogue is a reminder of just how real this threat is," end quote. Channel 2 Israel News has just reported that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu allegedly desires to make relations with Saudi Arabia official before the 2019 elections in Israel. This despite an ongoing state of war between the two nations and amidst growing accusations connecting Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman with Israeli intelligence firm NSO Group regarding the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Additionally, it seems the two are potentially even connected, as some say that NSO's Pegasus program was approved and sold to the Saudis as a push for Israel to grow closer with Saudi Arabia in part of an anti-Iranian alliance. Though NSO is a private entity, sales of their Pegasus software, an advanced surveillance program, must be approved by the Defense Ministry's Defense Export Control Agency. NSO is refusing to confirm or deny the sale to Saudi Arabia, however, releasing a statement saying that NSO is a supplier of a product, but that the, quote, "customer makes representations that the product will be used in a way that's lawful in that country. Obviously, there are sometimes abuses," end quote. Still, a sharp online critic of Saudi royals who lives in Canada, Mr. Abdulaziz, filed a lawsuit against NSO claiming that he and Khashoggi's communications were monitored. He's demanding $160,000 in damages, but NSO called the lawsuit, quote, "completely unfounded." Following through on comments made back in October, it appears now as though Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison is indeed looking to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. According to Australian public television station SBS, the move must now only be ratified by the Australian cabinet on Wednesday. Regardless of the cabinet's decision, though, a full embassy move will certainly not happen quickly. It's estimated to cost around $200 million, prompting Australia to announce a consular office in Jerusalem first, similar to how the United States scheduled its transition from Tel Aviv. In fact, as of now, only the United States and Guatemala have their embassies in Jerusalem. Paraguay moved theirs to Jerusalem as well back in May, but returned it to Tel Aviv in September. Meanwhile, the Brazilian President-elect Jair Bolsonaro has also just promised again to transfer the Brazilian embassy to Jerusalem and to close the Palestinian mission in Brasilia. But though Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised Bolsonaro for the planned move, Bolsonaro has drawn lots of criticism from the Arab world. Brazil is one of the largest exporters of halal meat to Arab nations, who have now threatened that an embassy move could result in risking relations and trade. After sending a letter to Bolsonaro, the Arab League is now also set to meet in Brasilia to discuss the move further. Additionally, although it's Brazil's decision where to have their embassy, the letter threatened that the move could break international law. Now, as part of an ongoing project, the area around 3 churches near the Jordan River, where Jesus is believed to have been baptized, has now finally been cleared of over 1,500 landmines. And now, for the first time in over 50 years, the monasteries at the Qasr al-Yahud baptism site will see congregants and pilgrims once again.
This is very unique to be in a place like this, that nobody was here almost 50 years. It is reserved at the day it was.
Because the area was for a long time an active war zone, the total goal is to clear 6,500 landmines from the area by 2020. And as of now, just 3 of the 7 churches in the area have been given the all clear by the 22 explosive sappers running the project. But considering the Israeli authorities believe many of the targeted areas to be heavily booby-trapped in addition to just being mined, the progress thus far is remarkable. Those in charge include the Israeli Defense Ministry and the British anti-mine organization the Halo Trust. And the Halo Trust, which is a UK-based demining group, has provided 10 million shekels, around $2.6 million, while the Israeli government has provided 6.5 million shekels, or around $2 million towards the project. Up until now, sappers have cleared the Greek Orthodox monastery, the Franciscan chapel, and the Ethiopian monastery of the Trinity. Still yet to be cleared are the Syrian Orthodox monastery, the Russian chapel, the Coptic monastery, and the Romanian monastery.
When we will finish this project, this land will be released back to the monasteries, and then people will come here and can use again these churches. I'm talking about the Ethiopian, Coptic, and Russian, and Romanian, and Franciscan, and Greek Orthodox will come here, this holy site, and do their holy pray again.
In yet another special Hanukkah celebration, hundreds of worshippers from all over the world gathered in Kerala, India on Thursday to mark the Paradisi Synagogue's 450th anniversary. It's also the synagogue's first time opening in prayer in nearly 50 years, as most of the congregants moved away in the 1950s and 60s.
It's very great for me because my father born in India and came to Israel about 55 years ago. And it's very wonderful to see this.
Originally built in 1567, the synagogue was left to ruin and the Jewish congregation dwindled in the area to just 5. And after its closure, the synagogue was reportedly looted and damaged by extreme weather too. But now, with all new lighting and donated decorations, new and old, congregants who had long since moved away returned for a special candle lighting ceremony and 3 days of celebrations. In addition, the services were led using a handwritten Torah scroll that afterwards is set to go to the 818-year-old Kadavum Bagan synagogue nearby. In fact, there are 7 synagogues that were formed in the Cochin, Kerala area, and evidence does show Jewish history dating back to 70 AD in the Kerala area alone, though just 5,000 Jews remain in all of India today, out of the nation's billion-strong population. All right, that's it for this week's Weekly Review. Remember to follow us on Facebook for more news at Israel English News, and of course on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.